Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: President Trump hiking tariffs on China to 125% after Beijing played hardball. Meanwhile, other countries are getting a 90-day pause. Details on the escalating trade war.
You might even say that he goaded China into a bad position.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says countries who come to the negotiating table and don't retaliate would be rewarded. A look at who has hit back and who has not. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth saying the United States is taking back influence in the Panama Canal from the Chinese Communist Party. More on his plan to meet Beijing's rising challenge. Is the leader of the Chinese Communist Party losing his grip on power? Insider sources and a growing number of articles within China's news circles are hinting at Xi Jinping's declining authority. Those speculations reflected by the disappearance of several of his closest aides inside the Chinese military. But here's the catch. Some of them are the key players in Xi's plan to invade Taiwan. President Trump backing the Chinese Communist Party into a corner. Trump raising tariffs on Chinese goods to 125% Wednesday, effective immediately. That's while authorizing a 90-day pause on the over 70 countries that have not retaliated and reached out to negotiate. Stock market bounces back after President Trump's announcement. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has the details.
President Trump himself touted about what he calls the biggest day in financial history as the stock markets really soar after his announcement that he's going to drop his reciprocal tariffs for most trading partners from what they were when they announced it last week to now a 10% baseline tariff, but all except for China, who chose to retaliate and is now facing a punishment of an 125% tariff. And now the stock markets are roaring back, including, for example, the benchmark S&P 500 growing over around 8%, and also the tech-heavy Nasdaq rose by around 10%, heading for its best day since 2008. And also the Dow also rose by over 7% or over 2,500 points in just over the past hour amid this new announcement. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also told us at the White House here that this was Trump's plan all along, that he was trying to wait until this day to announce it to really gain a massive leverage to make these countries to come to the U.S. to negotiate. And Bessent also suggested that Trump might have been intentionally goading China into a bad position. Watch.
This was his strategy all along, and that you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors, and we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate. Things will turn out well.
While around 75 countries have now come to the U.S. to negotiate new tariffs, China chose to retaliate with an 84% tariffs on U.S. goods set to go into effect tomorrow. Meanwhile, Trump announced this afternoon that, quote, based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, he's now raising tariffs on China to 125%, adding that he hopes that China will, quote, realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. And that we also heard from him just now at that event at the White House that he says China is the biggest abuser in history, adding that it's been sucking the U.S. dry when it comes to treating the U.S. unfairly in trade. And White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt today told us at the White House that she thinks a lot of the media outlets have not understood what President Trump has been trying to do, that they clearly, quote, miss the art of deal by President Trump, as they predicted that the new tariffs would pull countries away from the U.S. and closer to China, but now she says the reality is showing the opposite. Watch.
You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them. As the president has shown great courage, as the secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher.
So in the announcement today, it means that all countries, actually including Mexico and Canada, which face higher tariffs due to previous announcements by President Trump, will all now face just a 10% baseline tariff. And that strategy, according to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, is that Trump wants to have more time to personally get involved with the negotiations. So all of these over 75 countries have reached out to negotiate with the U.S. And Bessent says that Trump wants to get involved to make sure that, of course, his intake is part of it and that he gets the best deal out of every country. And also, we know that Trump himself said that out of the 75 countries who have now come to make a deal, he says it's really part of the process to liberate the U.S. from bad deals made over the past few decades. So that, again, goes back to his first announcement last week, touting this as Liberation Day when he first announced the reciprocal tariffs. And now he's saying that the whole process is part of his plan to liberate the U.S. from bad deals.
The administration also raised tariffs on low-dollar shipments from China after previously closing the de minimis exemption. It allowed Chinese retailers like Temu and Shein to ship goods to the U.S. duty-free. The administration yesterday announced a tariff increase on small parcels from China to 90% of their value, or $75, with a future hike to $150. That's up from the previous plan of 30% or $25. The order applies to packages valued at under $800 and takes effect on May 2nd. China filed a new complaint with the World Trade Organization on Wednesday, calling U.S. tariffs on China reckless. It also added 12 American firms to an export control list and banned 6 others from investing in China. The Chinese regime has urged Chinese citizens to rethink traveling to the U.S. amid trade tensions. The country's Culture and Tourism Ministry put out an alert Wednesday night, saying it advises citizens to carefully assess the risks of traveling to the U.S. How have countries reacted to Washington's tariffs? So far, the Chinese Communist Party is on the short list of countries retaliating and is hitting back the hardest. Canada slapped a 25% tariff on some vehicle imports from the U.S. The European Union also approved its own set of retaliatory tariffs. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is scheduled to meet with President Trump next Thursday to discuss. Meloni told Italian business leaders that she supported an offer made by the European Commission to introduce a zero-for-zero tariff deal to avert a trade war with the United States. As for countries choosing not to retaliate, Japan, South Korea, the UK, and Australia are looking to negotiate. And Japan is at the front of the line to schedule trade talks with Washington. What's more, Vietnam, Taiwan, India, and Israel have offered concessions. Mexico did not retaliate. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said countries that do not retaliate would be rewarded. He added that countries can offer other ways to reduce trade deficit, and he gave an example of a big liquefied natural gas project in Alaska that's looking for financing. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said on Tuesday that the United States is taking back its influence over the Panama Canal from the Chinese Communist Party. Hegseth was joined by Panama's public security minister during a visit to the Central American nation.
Our relationship with Panama, especially our security relationship, will continue to grow in the months and years ahead. Our relationship is growing in part to meet Communist China's rising challenge. Today, the Panama Canal faces ongoing threats. The United States of America will not allow Communist China or any other country to threaten the canal's operation or integrity. To this end, the United States and Panama have done more in recent weeks to strengthen our defense and security cooperation than we have in decades. China did not build this canal. China does not operate this canal, and China will not weaponize this canal. Together with Panama in the lead, we will keep the canal secure and available for all nations through the deterrent power of the strongest, most effective, and most lethal fighting force in the world.
President Trump has expressed a desire to regain control of the canal, criticizing Panama's tolls for American ships as excessive. Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Panama as part of his first official foreign trip in February. Shortly after, Panama said it would not renew its agreement with China's Belt and Road Initiative, a strategy the Chinese Communist Party uses to gain geopolitical influence. The ports at each end of the Panama Canal mark a vital gateway for warships and cargo between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans.
The Panama Canal is the world's second busiest waterway between two oceans. The shipping lane holds major importance for the U.S., as more than 40% of U.S. container traffic passes through the canal. In total, it's valued at roughly $270 billion a year. A company controlled by Hong Kong-based company CK Hutchinson controls two ports there, one on each side of the canal. Panama's authorities say they've found the Hong Kong company's contract has been breached a number of times, including that the company failed to pay $1.3 billion owed. The scheduled contract between the firm and the country would end in 2046. But Panama's authorities have the power to end it early if they see fit. Coming up, is the leader of the Chinese Communist Party losing his grip on power? Insider sources and a growing number of articles within China's news circles are hinting at Xi Jinping's declining authority. Those speculations reflected by the disappearance of several of his closest aides inside the Chinese military. But here's the catch. Some of them are the key players in Xi's plan to invade Taiwan. The world's biggest military alliance is raising concerns about China's arms buildup. To counter it, the head of the alliance is calling on NATO members and allies to work together. And quantum computing is the heart of the world's high-tech competition. But what makes it so important for the U.S. to keep an upper hand? An expert breaks it down.
It's a great thing because it can help expand and move technology even faster than AI. But if it's weaponized by the militaries and governments, then it can be a horrifying thing at the same time.
Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. As trade tensions escalate between Washington and Beijing inside China, another battle of power is quietly broiling. Recently, several of the closest aides to Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping have disappeared from the public eye. It sparks speculation about whether they have fallen victim to the regime's internal struggles. Experts say if confirmed, their ouster would sharply reduce Xi Jinping's power and impact his plan to invade Taiwan. For more than a decade, Xi has carefully placed his trusted allies within the Chinese military, while removing over 200 generals who were not loyal to him. Another of Xi's ambitions is to take control of self-governed democratic Taiwan, which the CCP has never ruled. U.S. intelligence believes that Xi set a deadline for the invasion, the year 2027. However, something seems to have gone wrong since last summer. A slew of key players that Xi designated to lead his Taiwan invasion have vanished from the public eye or been removed from their positions. Zooming in, the third in command of the Chinese military, He Weidong, has not been spotted in public for almost a month. U.S. intelligence and the Pentagon told the Washington Times that he could be the latest victim of Beijing's purge. Another admiral of Xi's faction, Miao Hua, is under investigation for violating the Communist Party's guidelines. Miao previously helped Xi promote many officials inside the Chinese military. Insider sources say nearly a dozen top Chinese military officials, seen as Xi's closest aides, are being investigated or arrested. NTD cannot independently verify these reports due to Beijing's lack of transparency and its control over the flow of information out of China. But one thing we do know is that these individuals have not been seen in public for a while. So if they were ousted from the CCP's ranks, who's pulling the trigger? Heng He is a China affairs expert who has studied China issues for over 3 decades. He has testified before the U.S. Congress and the EU Parliament as an expert witness.
The first possibility is that Xi Jinping is purging his own people, but that doesn't make much sense, because not everyone in the military is his people. If he starts removing his own loyalists, it would only weaken his influence within the military, so that scenario seems unlikely. However, such purges would still need his approval. which means if this is being forced on him, then the opposing forces must have grown so powerful that he can no longer resist them. So, in my view, it's clear that Xi Jinping's power is now facing significant constraints.
Tang Jingyuan has been a China affair analyst for the Chinese language edition of NTD for years. He, too, suspects that Xi's aides are being targeted by an opposition force inside the CCP, not by Xi himself. Among those reportedly being purged are the commander of the Eastern Theater Command and the commander of the Rocket Force. Both would be key players in a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan.
When it comes to invading Taiwan, the two most critical military forces Xi relies on are the Eastern Theater Command and the Rocket Force. These are the two foundational forces he values the most. Given this situation, it can only suggest that this is a sweeping purge and act of retaliation orchestrated by his political rivals, directly targeting Xi Jinping.
Insider sources from Beijing's political circle report that the force opposing Xi from within the Communist Party has been spurred to action because of China's sluggish economy and record-high geopolitical tensions. The world's biggest military alliance, NATO, is raising concerns about China's arms buildup and military drills staged near Taiwan. The head of the alliance called on NATO members and allies to work together.
And of course, we are worried about all these drills and all these military exercises. So we follow them very closely and are a worrying sign, clearly.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte spoke on a visit to Japan and said China is both supporting Russia and building up its own armed forces, and that countries cannot be naive to what is happening. Rutte stressed Japan's importance while speaking at a Japanese naval base. Japan considers China a regional threat and in recent years has strengthened its defense capability. Countries with shared security concerns are strengthening ties as the Chinese Communist regime escalates threats.
NATO consists of 30 European countries, plus the U.S. and Canada. The U.S. leads the alliance. If oil powered the economies of the past and semiconductors drive today's market, quantum computers are expected to become the lifeline of the future. Quantum computing has already entered the heart of the world's high-tech competition. But why is it so important for the U.S. to keep its upper hand? We tapped Rex Lee, a cybersecurity advisor from MySmart Privacy, for more. Talking about staying ahead of China in terms of quantum, you and I have talked about in the past, say Microsoft or NVIDIA, they share their AI IP with Chinese companies and sometimes the Chinese regime. Any word on IBM and this latest quantum?
Well, you know, with quantum computing in particular, one thing that Arvind Krishna said, and we've all been led to believe that quantum computing has not proliferated around the globe. That's not true anymore. Mr. Krishna, the IBM CEO, stated that there are over 80 quantum computers that have been deployed by IBM in multiple countries around the world. IBM will not deny that they don't have a quantum computer in China, but they will not establish that they do have one. So it remains nebulous. But IBM has been sharing technology with China dating back to 1995. However, what a lot of people don't realize is that China has a program called China's Civil Military Fusion Strategy. And basically, it's a CCP-led program that combines the ability to take civilian-based technologies like computers, operating systems, and apps, and not only have those sold and developed in China to Chinese citizens, but also where the military can adopt these technologies, including AI. And we recently saw that with Microsoft, Google, and NVIDIA, who are sharing their AI technology with Chinese companies and selling NVIDIA GPU chips to thousands of Chinese companies in the development of Chinese AI that supported DeepSeek and other AI platforms.
I want to dig into that because it sounds like that would raise all sorts of national security concerns, especially when it comes to something like quantum computing, where people talk about, oh, whoever has that first quantum computer will make all of our encryptions and passwords obsolete. Talk to us about that aspect.
Quantum computers have already proliferated around the world. And quantum computers aren't going to be like a PC that you would own in your home. And businesses are not going, a lot of businesses will not own a quantum computer, but the business model behind that is a cloud-based model where today you can actually sign up for subscriptions and link your computer and develop in quantum to these computers that are being set up. This could be the model for China's quantum development as well, where the government will control the quantum technology, then allow companies like ByteDance, the developers of TikTok, or WeChat, which is developed by Tencent, Temu, Shin, and all these other Chinese apps. Those developers then could have access to a quantum cloud-based system developed in China. And I firmly believe that this has already happened. And then if you look at it for consumer purposes or business purposes, it's a great thing because it can help expand and move technology even faster than AI. But if it's weaponized by the militaries and governments, then it could be a horrifying thing at the same time.
Well, always insightful, Rex Lee. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.